Today I'm talking about should you prioritize paying off the mortgage? So as you're approaching retirement and you've got extra cash flow or extra cash from any source, should you be prioritizing paying off the mortgage versus putting more money into super versus investing more? And the answer, as always, on all these things is maybe. It depends on your own circumstance, etc. But I'm going to talk about some examples of frameworks that can help you make decisions around this. Firstly, general advice. I don't know you and your stuff personally. You're going to get some good ideas here, but you should do your own research before acting on anything. And the framework we love to use to solve any problem is to, number one, get context. We get context by what we call our 5 essential steps around real planning, which is one, having a plan, a core belief that the best decisions are made as part of a long-term plan. And that plan is just firstly, where are you at? What's your stock take, your assets, your liabilities, your income, etc. Crystal clear picture of your financial wealth. Secondly, what are your goals? What do the retirement goals look like, etc. And then what strategy? So today we're talking about strategy and then eventually tactics. So strategy might be, I'm going to get more money into super. I'm going to pay off my mortgage. Tactics gets down to how I'm going to do that, when I'm going to do that. But it's important to solve the planning question before you solve the tactical questions. So, and what I mean by that, when someone says, Rob, should I pay off? I've just got 200,000 from selling a property. Should I pay down my home mortgage? Now, that's a tactical question. So we need to get context first, and that context can only be got when you've got a plan. Now, when that's a fully detailed plan that you've worked on with an advisor or a back-of-the-envelope plan you've done yourself, any plan is going to be better than just dealing with the tactical question. So let's get some frameworks around paying off the mortgage. So a few points. Paying off debt is always good. So I talk often about good, better, best. So paying off mortgage, always good, never bad. There may be better things and there may be something that is the best. Now, some of this we can work on straight away and some of it we don't know because we don't know the future. So if I'm faced with a simple choice, do I pay that 200,000 off my mortgage or do I put it in super? I don't know which is going to be best yet because I don't know the future. If super has brilliant returns and mortgage rates are low, then paying off super would have been a good decision. If super goes sideways for the next 5 years and interest rates were high, paying off the debt would have been better. So just that concept, it's always good, but not always best. And there may be better things as well. It depends on interest rates, and I'm going to take you through a framework that can help you decide around that. In other words, the higher interest rates are, the more the return you get by paying off the mortgage. Now, when I say return, it's a guaranteed return too. If you've had a 10% mortgage and you pay off the mortgage with that 200,000, you're getting a guaranteed return of 10%. And in fact, it's better than that pre-tax. And I'll take you through that in a minute. So it depends on what other returns you're likely to get. So I'll give you an example. If you were just going to put that 200,000 in the bank, and maybe you're going to get 1 or 2%, it's absolutely better to pay it off the mortgage and get, let's say, 6%. So clearly that's a better thing. But if it looks like, if your super's been going well, let's say it was averaging 8, 9%, and if the market looked like it was going to continue with that, not that you'll ever know for sure, and that's the one thing about paying off the mortgage, it gives you certainty. But let's say, you were confident you were going to get 8, 9% on your superannuation, then it's possibly better putting extra money into super. But it's also going to depend on your plans. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you've got that 200,000, but you're wanting to update the house before you retire. You might need to spend it. So it possibly is better off going off the mortgage and then redrawn. So if you've got offset accounts or if you've got redraw capability, you just park it off the mortgage. And that's because we don't want to do any long-term investing for money that's only going to be short-term. Otherwise, we're risking too much. We're speculating on what the market might do in that next 1 year, 2 year, until we do that renovation in that case. So it depends on our other plans and what we might use for that money. Now, a big one, tax, which people don't think about. if you're paying off a mortgage is not tax deductible. So you've got to earn more to pay the mortgage because you earn money, you pay tax, and you pay off the mortgage. And I'm going to give you some examples around this coming up. So, but if you've got no mortgage and you've got an investment property and you're thinking about paying off debt, well, you're actually getting a tax benefit. So I'll give you an example. If you've got an investment property and your mortgage rate is 6%, that 6% is tax deductible. If you're on the top tax rate, it means your after-tax return on that is going to be closer to 3%. So that's not huge. You may be better off doing other things with that, depending on everything else that's going on. So it also depends on your super balances. If you've got low super balances and you're trying to boost your super balances, clearly prioritizing super. There's a concept called catch-up contributions. That means if your super balances are under 500,000 and you haven't maximized all your contributions over the last 5 years, you can catch up. So sometimes it's going to be better to do that. And we're going to give you some examples to talk through these. So let's have a look at the maths of paying down debt and the maths or the return. So, because we can actually calculate the return we're likely to get. So in this two examples, I've got the mortgage rate the same in both, 6%. I've got one of them where it's non-deductible, which would be your mortgage, and one of them where it's tax deductible, which might be an investment property debt. Both cases interest rate 6%, but our return is different because the tax deductibility of the interest. So in the first example, let's say we're paying the top marginal tax rate, 47%. So the top tax rate is 45% plus Medicare levy of 2%. So that gives us a total tax rate of 47%. So if we're not getting a deduction, we've got to earn almost twice as much. Now the math of this, you can just sort of double it if you're on the top tax rate, and that would give you 12%. The exact maths is 6% divided by 1 minus 47, which is the tax rate, which gives us 11.3%. So by paying down the mortgage in this case, we're getting a pre-tax return of 11.3%. Now that's a good return. So that is going to be a good thing to do just based on the return. And this is what I mean mortgage. Paying off mortgage is always good. But let's do some what ifs before we go to the deductible case. Let's say the mortgage rate was 5%, but let's say you were only earning a smaller amount, and let's say your marginal tax rate was only 16% or 18%. Let's call it 20 to make the math simple. So if we did the maths there, 6%, 1 minus 0.2, which is 8, 6 divided by 0.8 would be about a 7 to 7.5% return. That's okay. That's not a bad return. It's certainly better than money in the bank or anything else. It's starting to get up around what decent super returns should be. So in this case, because it's non-deductible and a lower tax rate, it's not as good as someone on the higher tax rate. So if you're on a higher tax rate, paying off a mortgage is always a really good return. But let's have a look now at investment debt. 6%, same rate, but now we've got a tax deductible debt. So our pre-tax return here is just 6%. Our post-tax return in this case would be closer to 3%. So we can get better than that. Keep in mind, if you're in super and the tax rate on super is 15%, if you're getting a 7% return in super, even with the tax rate there, that's still better. So the key take out of this one is if you are on a high tax rate, then paying off debt is pretty good. And it's guaranteed. You're getting a guaranteed return of whatever the mortgage rate is. Whereas money in super, money in other investments, the future's unknown. We don't know what we're going to get. Tax deductible debt, take your time. You might want to consider the strategy we often use for people is adding more money to super and then pulling that super out tax-free when you retire and you're over 60 and paying off the deductible debt at that stage, subject to your planning. So let's have a look at a trade-off matrix. I love a good matrix. And we're going to combine two things here. We're going to have a look at interest rates on our horizontal scale, whether they're high or low, whether they're rising or dropping. And we're going to have a look at recent returns. So if we're looking at the 1, 3-year, 5-year returns on our super, are they high or are they low? Does credible experts think the market's really good value right now, or do they think it's expensive? So let's talk about some combinations. And it's October as I record this. The markets have been running hot. Returns have been good. So right now we would say recent returns are high and the market's probably a little bit expensive. Doesn't mean you don't invest, but it's a little expensive. Sorry, let me get back to there. So right now we're up the top of the chart in terms of recent returns. And then we'll look at where interest rates are. Now, interest rates, depending on your personal experience, maybe you think they're high, maybe you think they're low. For most of us in our audience who are in their 50s, early 60s, on the way to retirement, we'd probably consider interest rates here as low to medium. So let's call it medium here. And let's say, but we know they're dropping. We've had 2 rate cuts and there's talk of another one. So rates are dropping. So we've got interest rates low and dropping. Let's say rates are going to settle at 5%, but we've got recent returns are high. So we've got personal preference as the case here. Now you might say that that's not a decision, Rob. I want to know pay off debt. Well, they're both okay. If in doubt, you might err towards the guaranteed return of paying off debt, particularly a mortgage, but not necessarily an investment debt. Let's go back and say, let's say interest rates were 8% and they were high and rising. So if you went back to 2007, interest rates were being pushed up because the economy was running hot and stock market returns had been incredibly high. So it was a no-brainer to pay off debt and get a guaranteed return. Now, this serves 2 purposes as well. When you pay off the debt, you've then got ammo for if the market comes down, where you can borrow that back, pull it out of your redraw and invest when the market is now better value. So paying off debt during a time of high market returns is a good thing. How do you know when the market returns are high? Well, you need to tune in to credible people to get a fair idea. Now that's hard. You got to pick your sources carefully. So let's have a look down the bottom here where recent returns are low. So if we went back, say, to 2020, and during COVID, share market returns dropped about 36% really quickly. And at that point, lots of credible experts are saying, wow, share markets are now cheap. So if interest rates were low, and we've got the situation where at that time, if you remember, interest rates dropped and all of a sudden there was 2% mortgages, some even at 1.8, 1.9%. So interest rates were low. So we had interest rates low and we had recent returns low. So that's the bottom right-hand quadrant here. So it's a no-brainer to invest. So we've got low interest rates. So paying off the debt would give us a low return, albeit guaranteed, but we've got share market cheap. So I would be encouraging most people in that stage to go hard and get money into super, get money into share market investments, depending on their ideal structure. If interest rates are high, that would be personal preference. So let's talk about the general rule out of that. If market returns are high, you're going to be more inclined to pay off debt. If market returns are low and represent good value, you're going to be more inclined to invest. But if you're a high income earner, you're going to be more likely to pay off debt. If interest rates are even at 5%, you're getting pretty close to a 10% return. So hopefully that's a helpful matrix. Case study, let's throw a few case studies into the mix now. So the first one, this particular person has just inherited or about to inherit 800,000. Coincidentally, they've got a mortgage of 800,000. They're paying 7,000 a month. They're 55. They've got 7 years to go to retirement. They've got 300,000, 200,000 in super, and they've got 100,000 available each of catch-up contributions. Now, their earnings are 200,000, 80,000. So one earning good money, one earning average money. But the wild card is about to sell an investment property, and it's got a capital gain. So, and they're going to clear about 700,000. So we've got a lot going on here, but let's have a look at some basic principles. It would be very easy just to pay off the mortgage here, utilizing that. And that would be, like I said, it's always good, but is it the best? And I'm not going to come up with an exact answer here because we would want to talk about a whole lot of other things. When they were close, how close are they to retiring? We know in this case they're going to have about 700,000 from the property. They'll be mortgage free. They've got 500 in super, so they're up to 1.2 million. They've got 7 years to retirement here, so the super's going to double. So they're in pretty good shape. So we can be optimal. We can try and think about maximizing returns here. So some of the things we would definitely do here, we would definitely want to utilize the catch-up contributions. So depending on the timing of the property sale, we could use some of the inheritance to literally put into super. So 200,000 into super each. If their taxable capital gain is 200,000, and they've got 100,000 capital gain catch-up contributions each, that's going to wipe out the capital gain, or at least get that taxed at just 15%, which is the tax when you put money into super for tax-deductible contributions. So 100,000 each, that solves their 100,000 each capital gain. So 200,000 into super here would be smart. That'll leave 600,000 left over. Should they pay off the mortgage? Well, they're also going to have 700,000 left over from super. In this case, we're probably going to take that, and they can get 360,000 each into super of non-concessionals. That's where we put the money in. We don't pay any tax on that, and that's going to get another 700,000 into super plus the 200,000. So all of a sudden, 900,000's gone into super. They've still got 600 left over because they only used 200 of that. So we're going to say, yep, let's pay that off the mortgage, and that's going to mean the mortgage will be paid off in about 3 years. And then when that's paid off, they can take that 7,000 a month that they're paying off the mortgage, and they can now smash that into super. So they're going to be in really good shape. But they'll be better off tax-wise by not putting all the inheritance straight off the mortgage in this case. Wouldn't be a bad thing, but there's better, more than likely. Would depend on returns as well. Let's go to another one. Similar circumstances, 800,000, paying $7,000 a month, 54 years old, 10 years to retirement. So a bit longer. Good earners, both up around the top tax rate of tax. So certainly one is super balances 300 and 200. Now all of a sudden their kids have finished uni and they've now got an extra 3 months available. And they're going, Rob, do we pay that off the mortgage or do we put more into super or other investments? Now, this gets back to that matrix. We got top income earners. So paying off the mortgage here is a good thing. That would give them a guaranteed return. Let's say their mortgage rate's 5%. I'm going to assume it's dropped a little from where we are. Top marginal tax rate, you can almost double that. So it's a 9 to 10% return. That's a good guaranteed return. And if that means they pay off the mortgage sooner, which they would, if all of a sudden you're paying an extra $3,000 a month, they'll free up at the end of that. They'll pay off the mortgage quicker. And once that's paid off, they can then accelerate money into super. So in this case, I'm probably going to err on using that $3,000 to pay in. But we can actually do more than one thing here. And I'll take you through this by this third example. So we've got a couple also 50, a bit closer to retirement, 6 to 10 years. Still got an inheritance. I'm going to mix them up here. Got the inheritance of 800,000, mortgage of 800,000. One of them's earning 300,000, so absolutely top tax rate, but also paying an extra 15% on super. So if you earn more than 250,000, as many of you know, you pay 30% on the money going into super. And the super balance is here 1,600,000, so they've got good super. And they're actually considering a few things. Do they pay off the mortgage with the inheritance? Do they put more into super? Or do they start a share portfolio? And I'll introduce a concept here that we call debt recycling. So it's where you simply recycle from bad debt to good debt. So in this case, instead of just taking that 800,000 and investing it, say in a share portfolio, and the reason they do a share portfolio in their case versus super, there's many, but the main one for me is they're still 10 years away from getting access to their super. So if they decided they wanted to retire or take a sabbatical in somewhere in their 50s, having money outside of super is going to be essential. So they've got some cash flow, got some resources outside of super. So in this case, they could pay down the debt, but they could then borrow it back and invest. So we get two benefits here. They're paying down their non-tax deductible debt, They now borrow it back. So they've now got a debt again of 800,000, but now it's tax deductible. So it's 6%. They've got 48,000 of tax deductions on their tax rates. They're going to get refunds of about 24,000. So let me just do that in slow motion again. They could have just invested the 800,000. They would have still had their mortgage. So they would have had an investment of 800,000, a mortgage of 800,000. But by debt recycling, by taking that money, paying it off the mortgage, borrowing it back, making sure it's all done well, talk to your accountant, talk to your advisor, or do your own research. But they now get 48,000 a year of tax deductions. That's the interest rate at 6%, 24,000 of tax refunds, massive difference over the next 10 years, up to 240,000. So that's debt recycling and getting it smart. They could take that 24,000 tax saving, by the way, and put that into super every year, and that's going to build that up as well and preserve the tax effectiveness. Lots of things they could do that come into real planning, but hopefully that's given you some context. So let me sum up. Paying off the mortgage is always good, but it's not always the best. We've got all those things that matter, particularly interest rates, recent market performance, and your own tax position. So paying off the mortgage gives us certainty. It's a guaranteed return. And if in doubt, for some people, that's going to be attractive. But the best decisions are usually made as part of a real plan. And that's something either you can do yourself. You can sign up for our planning resources on our website. You can subscribe to this for more information like this. And we have our course upcoming. So jump on our website and register for our course where you can build your own retirement plan in a weekend. And that's going to help you get context about stuff, all this stuff like that. Hopefully that's helped. As always, if you can like this, share this, that helps get this message out. And if you've got ideas for future topics, please yell out. Until next time, Rob McGregor signing off.